Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Sarah Freeman, the Director of Exhibitions at Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, and it's my pleasure to be your host for tonight's conversation. Tonight's conversation with Yeon Ji Yoo and David Rios Ferreira. We're presenting this event in connection with the exhibition "Wish You Were Here," an installation by Yeon Ji that was curated by David and is on view here at the Brattleboro Museum through July 6th. You can learn more about the installation on our website, brattleboromuseum.org. You're going to learn a lot more about the installation tonight, but if you need more details, you can check out the website. Following tonight's conversation, we'll have a Q&A. Yeon Ji and David will happily respond to your questions and comments at that time, rather than during the conversation itself. To submit a question or a comment, please use the Q&A button on your screen. You can enter your questions or comments at any time, but we'll wait until the end to get into them. Okay, now I would like to ask our guests to join me on screen as I tell you a little bit about them. So David and Yeon Ji, would you please turn on your cameras? Welcome. Yeon Ji Yoo is a mixed media artist working across drawing, painting, sculpture, and installation. Her art explores themes of memory, decomposition, and the reclamation of biological and cultural legacies. David Rios Ferreira is a visual artist, independent curator, and the director of the Young Learners Program at the Museum of Modern Art, where he develops award-winning programs that nurture the next generation of creative professionals. Rios Ferreira focuses on curatorial work that amplifies underrepresented narratives and provides a platform for voices, stories, and histories often overlooked in mainstream art discourse. Hello to you both. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm now going to completely disappear and let you two take it away. And if you just give me, give me a nod when you're ready for me to come back. But thanks again.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, everyone. Good evening. We're super excited. I won't take up too much audio time because we really want to hear from Yeon Ji. Thank you, Sarah, for that brief introduction to Yeon Ji's work. I thought I would give a little bit more of a broader scope of where we find Yeon Ji, and of course, then we're super excited to hear more about her work. So as Sarah noted, Yeon Ji Yoo is an interdisciplinary artist working primarily in sculpture, installation, and painting. Her practice explores memory and the constructed nature of reality and the emotional landscapes that bind us together. After receiving her BFA from the Cooper Union, Yoo began her career as an arts educator before earning her MFA in New Forms from Pratt Institute and an MS in Environmental Science from the College of Staten Island. Yoo's immersive installations and sculptural works have been exhibited nationally at institutions and galleries, including Rockland Center for the Arts, Empty Set Gallery, Pelham Art Center, the Children's Museum of Manhattan, Wave Hill, the Brooklyn Museum, and the Museum of Modern Art. She currently works in Red Hook, where I believe we find her this evening, where she continues her artistic practice. And now I will turn off my camera, and we look forward to hearing more from Yeon Ji Yoo.
Hi, I hope you can all hear this. I'm worried about my internet going in and out a little bit. I'm Yeon Ji Yoo. Thank you for being here to learn about my solo exhibition, Wish You Were Here, curated by David Rios at the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. I'm going to share some visuals with you. And here is my work. That. I'm extremely grateful to David for again gifting me with a chance to exhibit my work, and to the Brattleboro Museum for sharing their wonderful and perfect Merry Summer Gallery to allow me to make my universe a reality. I'm going to share a little bit about my background to help explain my work. I was born in Korea in 1978 and grew up in the countryside of rice paddies and piney mountains. I then immigrated to New York in 1982. I was raised in suburbia Queens, following my parents' financial stability, as did so many other Korean immigrants of that generation. And before Robert Moses developed all the modern infrastructure of New York, marshlands were indigenous, and I grew up loving the small, flooded grass worlds of my backyard as they were my own rice paddies to own. In these imaginations, fueled by overly saturated colors of cartoon TV of the time, my American dream was something like this: to have a perfect campfire out in Sasquatch Woods, to glide invisibly through the rolling hills of my neighborhood on my bike, and to have my parents speak to my teachers without the preface of, "I don't speak English very well." Um, David did talk a little bit about my education. I did grow up in New York. I went to college. I became a teacher in 2005. Excuse me. Um, as I was starting off as a young adult, my grandmother, who was suffering from dementia, committed suicide in the house that I grew up in. She was discovered by my own mother. Until then, my parents had been my pillars, and in an instant after, they aged 10 years and I became their crutch. Their English faded, their worldly possessions faded, their financial stability faded, and the light in their house faded. And before I go to the next slide, I just wanted to show you a piece in which it's called My Grandmother's Vanity, in which I am trying to still decipher how this loss is impacting my family and myself. I can't say that I have completely processed the cause of this tragedy and know not the total impact it had on my extended family or on my parents, but I do know that it has caused rifts and withdrawals into modes of safety and survival rather than a spreading out of dream lives here in America. My work helped me to parse out my frustrations and sense of disconnect from my technicolor youth to that of the dusty past and future map of my life. I started to collect fragile London plane tree branches that reminded me so much of bones and cocooned them in layers of string in a futile effort to rebind what was broken. And this is an installation view of If I Could Fix You. And here we see some figures and some kind of growths that could be growths or in the process of decay. And much of it is cocooning these fragile branches inside that I think really was a wonderful material to work with because it kept breaking and I kept having to fix it. And it was so much of this give and take that is part of processing loss. Um, I reimagined the lush landscape of my American dream into the war torn skeletons of Korea past and the afterlife of things lost. And here are two installation views. The first is The Fight, that was installed at Wave Hill. And then the second image is This Woods Remembers, done in 2017 at the Drawing Rooms. Um, Trees that were once sentinels and touchstones of pathfinding became rootless, hovering ghosts. And this was an installation. And I have always loved trees. My first drawing was a tree, and for me, they are magical places. But in a lot of ways, that magic is also very dark and scary. And I use it as a vessel to hold my ideas of what this landscape and this destination of this kind of journey that I have as a person growing up in America, but also as a woman aging. And I wanted to kind of express this confusion that could happen when you're in the trees, in the woods, when the trees don't stand still. So literally, you were meant to walk through this installation. Um, so I have the fortune of knowing David for a long time, and I was able to develop a body of work um, called The Kingdom of Heaven, and during a residency. And in this body of work, I started to use reclaimed packaging, cardboard boxes, to become the bones of small family shrines that housed vignettes and stories of my childhood, and that of my parents' youth, to compartmentalize the generational trauma of war, displacement, uprooting, and resettling through immigration, mental illness, and roles of women in my family. Um, Sorry, just going back here, we have two images. The house remembers itself. And in this house, in this shrine, we have um, a frame within the house, as if like the house is yearning for its past life, for its past kind of like dreams and desires that it had. And in the second image, my cousin Jung Jung jumps, and it is the story of my cousin who also committed suicide. And this was due to the stress of um, playing the role of a subservient woman in Korean society, and she was just really unhappy. And I think that that is a recurring theme that I worry about, and I try to process and try to learn from. Um, this was So while I'm building this, it's all parallel to the state of my parents' home in their own age after my grandmother's death. They have become hoarders of discarded furniture, moldy church donations, and expired canned goods, because you see them kind of shrinking back into themselves and getting back into this sense of survival mode that they had as they were growing up post Korean War. And here is a detailed image of Tell Me How to Feel, done in 2016. I'm hoping that I can share a little bit about my statement here for Wish You Were Here. Um, a lot of the imagery was kind of seeded from this um, Banana Yoshimoto book uh, called Amrita, in which she is describing the horizon. And she says, for some reason, waves hitting the shore bring uneasiness to some, especially when they look out over a scene that grows 20% larger than expected. And for me, that really encompassed how I felt about this outlook that I had, in which like you'd never know the end, and you kind of have to stay in this sense of survival mode, not knowing what is coming up at you. And so I this piece I think is a really great illustration of that idea. It's called Chasing the Horizon. And this is a piece that's also in the Wish You Were Here show. So all of the images that I will show in the next few slides are from the show itself, Wish You Were Here, at Brattleboro right now. So as a latchkey youth of the 80s, I learned of a version of America on television as a technicolor landscape with friendly but tall mountains, lush woods full of mischievous critters trolling vacationers. But in growing up, I learned that Technicolor is not the name of a place, but a process of making fiction, American dreams turned into American ghosts once the place they are tied to disappears, and that the only power American ghosts have is to be forgotten. In Wish You Were Here, I connect the start of my American dream journey to its elusive destination of a cartoon land. And on the left, you see The Flood, which is actually a photo transfer of a Carlton Watkins photograph. And he is a pioneer photographer of the national parks as they were being formed into national parks, and they were still very, very um, new to the idea of holding on to this kind of like beauty and natural resource that we have as Americans. And to the right, we have Flesh Pink, When Faith Fails Us, which is a reflection of my upbringing within the church, and kind of how a lot of that is based on mythology and hope. And sometimes, it's like type of world building that is also very much like my own work. It's not it's not based on like a truth, an absolute truth, and it leaves an openness to interpretation and to answers. Um, so here are two images of installation views at the show currently. On the left, we have the portal, and on the right, we have Calling Me Softly and Smoke Signals. I find myself drawn to the significance of objects in shaping our relationship with the world, from the smell of dust of an old drawer filled with secrets to the elusive calligraphic marks of history in black and white photographs. Each item holds a story waiting to be remembered and retold. Nostalgia permeates my work as I reflect on the spaces of my childhood, now tinged with the echoes of long neglected heartaches and generational traumas. I delve into personal fears and anxieties of the desire to belong to an American heritage while being of the Korean diaspora. So on the left, we have an image of the portal, which is a two-sided standing mirror in which you have feet that are the stands that come out in either direction so that whichever side you're facing, you're still confronting it. And one side, the side that you see in the image here is of Yosemite, which is an American landscape. And on the back side, you would see a Korean landscape. And I called it Portal because, you know, the idea that the idea holds this desire to be in both places at once, and then also you're kind of like neither belonging to neither landscape. And then on the right side we have a TV, like an old TV, which is like kind of like what I grew up watching, and a soban, which is like a low Korean table in which you would sit and you would have your meals there. But in my suburban latchkey Korean home, we would just have this thing in front of the TV, and like you just kind of grow up sitting there and watching TV. It's called Saturday Rituals, the TV. And the soban or the low table is called Frog Heaven. My work resonates with current discussions on environmental distress, as well as themes of immigration, the concept of home and psychology, and objects as portals of memory, time travel, and intentions slash misconceptions. So I have two images here. One is called prunes, which are actually a series of several branches that are cast from my dad's fig trees. He grows them in his yards. He loves them and he prunes them. And for me, these are nurse logs. These are stand-in for nurse logs that, even though they are discarded, they become this nurturing ground for new growth, as would happen to tree branches that fall in the woods. On the right side, we have Exodus, which is also a landscape that holds a fig tree branch, again, in reference to the biblical Exodus, in which a group of people are sent out or away and they're dispersed and they're transient for a long time. And, these people in the Bible, they don't find their homeland ever. um, so just as before I let David talk, just some explanations about my process. This is a detail image of the frog heaven. Um, and I use a lot of hot glue in my work because it reflects not only my like, oh, I need it done fast, fast, fast. And it's a very quick way to make things, but that is also tied to the way that my parents kind of crafted their living here in America. It's makeshift. It's very inventive in which my parents had to kind of work their gift shop in America, and it alludes to like the challenges of their immigrant life here. I also use a lot of picked up, discarded, and overlooked remnants of our mundanity in as we live, and try to like re-envision a story that it has. And I use a lot of found historical images and try to find myself in them. And so I hope this you enjoyed this presentation. David, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thank you so much. That was phenomenal. Thank you. I think there's like I hope everyone enjoyed that as well. I feel like there's just such a broad stroke of what you've accomplished. And I think that also for those in the audience that are either artists or really or just or arts, arts patrons, or those who enjoy looking at art, sculpture just in general is just so complex. I mean, you're thinking about space, you're thinking about the ways our bodies are engaging with the work. So, I think photos only capture so much. So I hope that everyone either on this Zoom has been able to see Yeon Ji's amazing installation, but also if you haven't had a chance, please visit. Um, and so thank you for that. And so spoiler alert for our audience, a lot of the times we have these conversations pre talks like this, and I think it's important for artists to kind of get a sense of the kind of questions I might ask. But of course, as I'm listening to Yeon Ji talk, I'm inspired, right? So I'm like hearing, sometimes things again or things for the first time. So I have like slightly new questions. I hope Yeon Ji isn't alarmed by some of my like off script questions that came up. Um, but I thought I would start with this first line that I wrote in the essay that I needed to have even after our first studio visit. Um, and that is, by entering Yeon Ji Yoo's crafted world, it feels like you're stepping into a vivid yet elusive dream whose beginning you can't quite recall. And Yeon Ji, I don't know if we talked about this, but like I love the film Inception. I don't know if you've seen it, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
And I feel like that was something that, that idea that recognizing, I mean, something maybe we don't all talk about, but this idea of a dream that there's not really a beginning. You kind of just enter into this narrative, like from some point. I don't even want to say the middle. Like part of me wants to say the middle, but you don't even know whether you're at the end of the beginning. Um, and then hearing you talk, again, having heard you talk already, but like thinking about this recognition of the idea of loss.
Hmm.
And so loss and dreams, there's sort of this, they're kind of diametric, but they're kind of relational in some ways. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how that plays out in your thinking, in your work. Like this, they seem to be these two ideas that either coalesce together or sort of, butt up against each other in your work. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about that relationship between loss and dreams.
I think definitely for me, even after so I'm using this as a concrete example, even after my grandmother passed away, or I've had like a crazy experience like that, a lot of times I get a reaction from people and they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. That must have been so bad. I don't know if it's just like my personality or I was trying to talk about it a little bit, but because I had to be like such a strong kind of like foundation for my parents to like rebuild themselves on, that I really did not feel a lot of grief for myself. Um, I felt my parents' grief and like kind of like their loss, but it's really hard to honestly say that I was like broken by this. I think my parents were broken by it, but I think that there definitely is a tremendous amount of loss, and yeah, in some ways grief, and anger, but like that loss is maybe only felt in this kind of dream world where your subconscious, or even just like this kind of storytelling that you do in dream life, fills in those gaps. Um, and tells you like, yeah, actually you should be really sad, or actually you should be, this is terrible. And I think like in that same way, those gaps are filled by this nonsensical dream world. I think that the world that I'm trying to build in my installation is like that. You know, you have so many questions that you're not sure about. So one of the things that I did want to share was, you know, like John Steinbeck, he's also someone in Grapes of Wrath. He says like, you know, you have to know yourself. Basically, I'm trying to quote him. How can we live without our lives? He says, and how will we know it's us without our past? And I think like that's um it's such a strong, like it punches me in the gut every time I read this, because I'm like, yeah, how am I supposed to know like kind of like where going? You know, like I don't know my future as I'm aging, but I also like feel this tremendous disconnect from like what I thought I knew about my family, what I thought I knew about, you know, our place in this neighborhood, in this world, in all of these kind of like places in society. Um, you know, I being a person who looks different from everybody in our neighborhood growing up, it's like you already feel like you don't belong sometimes, a lot of times. And then to be like, now I'm totally like just disconnected from everything. I think it was really important for me to have this um, installation to be able to create this world in which I try to fill those gaps. I definitely wanted the gallery to be a place that you walked right into and you were like, whoa, I'm in a different world. Just like in a dream, you like walk, you blink and you're like, well, then I'm here. And this is the fact. So I had these bright cornfields that were like stage sets, and you just walk right through, and all of a sudden you are, you know, confronted by this dark kind of like home setting. The other thing that I wanted to do in the installation was go from like this outdoor setting and kind of lead the viewer into what would be like a home porch situation. So like, ah, you've arrived, you've ended your journey. But meanwhile, you're hitting this wall where it's like, wait, is this safety? Have I arrived at this safe shelter? When it looks like, you know, it's everything is crumbling. Literally, it's like a body buried under the ground. Um, so yeah, it was a really great challenge to work in that space. I think the idea that it was like a little circular walk through that space made the space feel so much more like there was more happening. And yeah.
No, that's a beautiful description, and I think that for those who have gone through the installation and when you go through it, this idea of being confronted is really key because and it's also like, I mean, it's not a massive gallery, and you've certainly filled it. So when you walk in, you're surrounded on all angles. You know, you're in that, and even if you don't see it as another world, you are confronted by works on all corners. You're in your head, you know, you're in your brain a little bit. I did want to come back to this idea of, you know, we talked about you brought up the Steinbeck quote, and I wonder that, for the lack of better phrasing, that anxiety around understanding our history. How are you accessing that? Are you accessing that through dreams? Um, how are you unpacking these realities that you thought you knew that sort of reveal themselves over time? And how do you navigate that?
So, like, you mean by unpacking kind of like how I, well, for lack of better words, like how I come up with the ideas, or is that just to clarify that your question? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think the ideas, but also you talked about that importance of knowing your history.
Uh,
And I wonder, and again, this relationship to dreams, I mean, to speak plainly, are you dreaming about your family? Are you dreaming about these people? Are you confronting them in your dreams? Like yeah.
that is a great question. I don't dream of my family, but you know, I dream of the same kind of sense of feeling like lost, or like, where am I? Or like, what, wait, how did I get here? I think that I'm trying to express in my work. I think that's definitely what I feel in my dreams. And then, you wake up from that and you live your life and you're like, and you come across like a quote or an imagery or something that happens, or somebody's story, and you're like, that's not the same picture, but it is the same feeling and texture that I'm sensing and feeling also. And I think that that's um, you know, how I'm trying to make my work. And I think definitely one of the things that I will definitely admit is like, I don't have the answers to any of my own questions, like, where am I going? I don't know. And I think like the work is like that, or like, oh, this is how, Korean immigrants of the 1980s, like it definitely impacted like us as like a data, as statistics. I don't know that information either. I do know how it impacted my family. And I know from like the stories that I hear of people like my peers of that generation, like I know those stories. But yeah, it's, and then I try to like put two and two together and be like, maybe that's my answer, maybe that's my equation for that. So yeah, still searching, still trying to unpack.
And when you're doing that, are you like coming back to your studio practice? Are you finding that through your engagement with materials? Are you writing these things? Are you doodling? How are you? And I love that you brought up the idea of processing. Like, how are you processing even what you're talking about? Even this idea of like, I don't know where I'm going, and like I want to discover where, I want to try to discover where I'm headed. How does that play out in the studio?
I definitely, to answer the more easier questions, I'm definitely writing, I'm scribbling. I'm not like a poet or anything. I'm definitely sketching ideas. If I come across a beautiful landscape, I'm like, ooh, I imagine like I imagine I'm like a survival pioneer in there. Or, oh, I imagine being like, living a tiny moss life in the moss. I have these images. Or if I come across something that I read and I'm like, that person's life story really resonates with like my family, oh, this woman in my family. I start to like craft this idea together. Um, in the studio, again, I said I'm not a poet, but I think that if you guys know like what a haiku is, it's like that 575 syllable thing. It's so short and it's like such a homework. Like, it's like I gotta say what I'm trying to say and make it feel like a body or something complete within those like 17 syllables. Um, but like when a haiku is done and you're just like, oh wow, that those unrelated words come together and it gives you something bigger than like all those little parts. And I think like I'm looking at material, and I'm so drawn to material, like textures and how things feel, and also like accessibility of materials. Like I love using things that are, non-traditional art materials, because it's easy, and because, I'm a teacher and I'm tired after work and I'm like, what can I do that I want this to happen, but I don't have the money for it, or I don't have like the time to learn like this, you know, resin craft or whatever. Like, what can I do? And I think like discovering that is also part of the process. But yeah, like finding an old chair and being like, oh, what if I was sitting there and then what if the body disappeared? And so if I were to share what that looked like. Um so so here is the chair. I found this chair and I was like, you know, what what happens if the body just sat there long enough and like disintegrated, and then it just like gave birth to these flowers? And what if it were my body? And what if like, I'm gonna turn 47 in like 2 days, and I'm like so scared out of my mind of like menopause. I'm like, oh my God, it's happening to me. And a lot of my work right now is about that kind of like loss also. And now I'm like entering another era of my life and I'm like, how to deal with it and what does that mean? And like, do I ask my mom or is she mad that I didn't have a baby like before, it all went away. So a lot of these thoughts are happening to me. And so like this chair is something that I'm really happy with because I found something, I gave it a new life. I put two things that don't belong together. And like for me, it's a powerful image or it's a powerful like first step into talking about something that people think is associated with shame or um it's uncomfortable. And so like I'm really happy that I got to do this. It's part of my process. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now this work is just so strong. And I think, for you to bring up, this idea of our bodies betraying us or shifting us into a different stage, and like how do we process that? And it made me just sort of come back to this something you brought up earlier and something we talk about, you and I often about, you know, what it means to be living in this country and have like a culture that is either so different than what seems to be broadcast, if you
Yeah.
will, or shared. And you talked about like you were a family that didn't look like everyone else on the block, and I did, I did want to come back to this other piece that's part of your work, and I feel like it's all related, that you're you're having us think about this precarious notion of the American dream, right? And you're you're talking about I feel you share it that at its core it's a dream, and your installations, your work in general. I mean, I'm referring to the installation in the essay, but I feel like this is like your body of work in general.
Yeah.
Um, this country is built on this idea of aspiration and ambition, but we're seeking this, and it's kind of it's a fantasy, right? There's
Yeah.
other things at play. When and I think something that you and I have talked about is, and again, it's more important. So it's becoming more, unfortunately, more and more important to talk about. Is like, what do we picture? What is the general public picture? And they close their eyes and they think of the word an American. Who does that person look like? Right? Like, who does that person look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it kind of like we all know they don't look like you and me. Like that's not the person that these folks that people are picturing when if they were like, that rapid fire game of like, don't think of don't think of an elephant, don't think of an elephant, and it's in your head. So when you say like, well, what's picture an American, I think that people have been sort of brought into this visual understanding of what an American looks like, and I hope I'm hoping I'm making the connections here. And then your work delves into the American landscape, and we talk about being informed by television. And this is just setting up a question that I did share with you, but when you close your eyes and picture America, what do you see?
So I'm gonna just show you this image here. Um okay, to finish that sentence. When I close my eyes, the America I see is still a frontier of struggles, of vast wild beauty and unending horizons. But the land we are on is just like literally a crust away from a tremendous reshifting and resettling, especially now, right now. It's, my studio maid Rebecca was just sharing this one graduation sheet speech that she read, and she was like, not she read, I forget who the author is. Sorry, I just literally like coming into the studio was like perusing it. But one of the most powerful things that the speaker was saying to these young people were like, you know, it's terrible times right now. It's hard. It's very, very terrible, difficult times. But one of the most beautiful things that you have is this opportunity to kind of like rewrite what we are as Americans. I think that's pretty amazing. And that is the other side of the coin of like my, oh my God, dire, dire consequences. Um, this image that I'm showing you here is Where Does the Fox Live? It's done in 2021. It is again on this photo transfer of this vista of Yosemite, which is like this, the one of the grandest vistas of American landscape. And here we have trees aflame. We have these magpies that are like kind of harassing a hidden fox in its den. Like the land is burning. And I think, like, for me, this was immediately at the time when Trump in his first presidency was commenting about COVID, and he said, he said it was Kung flu, and we were going through a lot of like Asian hate. Like I like people on the train were like, "Oh my God, am I gonna get pushed into this train track?" It was kind of scary, and it still is lingering. And this encapsulates kind of like what I feel America is like right now. Like this beautiful, vast resources and full of promise, and like, you know, it is so full. It is like full, but it's also like, you know, there's scary things happening. Um, yeah, but again, going back to that one graduation speech, like it is a great time to rewrite and kind of reconfigure like how we see ourselves and each other moving forward.
No, what's so strong about this painting too is that the fact that the landscape is burning, I mean, it speaks to this idea of like, how do we're constantly, well, rather, we're constantly iterating, and I think that is a concept that people have come to, I think, take for granted or just assume about the process of getting through this, what's going on right now. And you're talking, and some people, on the other hand, like this image, are talking about you stripping it bare to really reassemble what's
Yeah.
happening. And, admittedly, I don't know if, I don't talk about this often in this like kind of like broad, you know, giant ether of Zoom where who knows who's listening.
Yeah.
But
Sorry. Sorry.
no, no, but like I don't, I'm being honest and vulnerable in that I don't know what that looks like, and what is that, when is that point gonna open? When is that opportunity gonna present itself, or has it? And so it makes me admittedly like feel a little hopeless sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. But
But
I wonder, yeah, no, please.
no, I think like, desperate times also means that like, if we think about our environment and like the state of the earth, like we got to live on this thing, and we are almost at a point of like no return. And I think like that desperateness is also what makes people be like, "Oh my God, let's take those desperate measures. Let's do something." And I think that is hopeful. That is hopeful. So,
So
uh,
that's a great segue to, we got two, I got two audience. I have two more questions and then we're gonna open it up to everyone. But Yeon Ji, what gives you hope?
um, so again, hope is knowing that, you know, as much as things are bad, like there are people who are imagining and creating. Like I tell my students all the time, I'm like, you are not here to just like, especially in the classroom when they're like, fighting or being like, this person. I'm like, you are not here to destroy. You are here to create. Literally, as artists, you are creating. And I think like art, knowing that art is its own truth, right? It's like in my installations, it's definitely not a historical truth. It's not even like a worldview truth, but it is a truth. And like when logic, when cultural mores, when words fail to make us accountable for each other, hope is knowing that like creating in these kind of like disparate worlds allows us to question and then to find answers that like somehow like poetry and haiku like somehow come together and you're like wow that does make sense with me and that collective thinking is what is hopeful for me.
So, I'm gonna have you finish this sentence. Above all else, we must remember what? What must we remember?
Above all else, here's a thought I had. Being an artist means that you have a responsibility to create with intent. Sharing and empathy are the best lessons of learning and creating, and creating with resourcefulness, without hierarchy of thinking about materials, and taking a risk is empowering. So, above all else, in my work. That's what. And for everything else, I don't know yet. I don't know yet. Um, but hopefully I'll learn through this process.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, David. Thank you so much for those questions. Thank you.
No, and thank you for bringing all your honesty, authenticity. Sarah's joined us back. We're hoping that the audience has some questions. Of course, I have some backups and other things that bubbled up as I was hearing all these wonderful things that Yeon Ji had to share. But yeah, we'd love to hear if folks have any thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you. That was a really great conversation. And we have a very lovely comment here from someone who seems like maybe they are or were a parent of one of your students, Yeon Ji, and she says, "You're such an amazing artist, Ms. Park, and I'm so grateful my daughter has had the opportunity to work with you at LaGuardia. It's such an eye-opener, not only seeing what you create, but also getting inside your head to learn about what has inspired your work. You've been a great source of inspiration to my daughter and are always so upbeat." That's lovely. Your ability to create and articulate is so precise and beautiful. In fact, you should give a class in talking about art. It's a lovely, lovely comment. And then your landscapes feel mythic, not just geographic. Are there specific American geographies, the West, the frontier, the rural Northwest, that you draw from as conceptual or visual anchors?
I think that so sometimes I'm like, ooh, but I find myself relating so much to like the pioneers of the old Manifest Destiny West. And I'm like, oh yeah, if I was in that situation, I'd be chopping down that tree, I'd be like hollowing out that log, and I'd be making a fire and cooking my frying pan. Like I love those kind of stories and imageries. And I think that the landscape that I always find myself building is mostly of that American West because it's like I'm here on the East Side. I want to escape my New York life and just kind of like go far away. And for me, this New York life in these suburban homes and these cubes and growing up, going to high school in the city, I think like uh for me, it always meant like my parents' hardship and kind of like that immigrant life. And it's like, when will we become real Americans? When will we like get to move on to that next part of our lives? And I think for me, it's always that West. Although sometimes, I am thinking about like floodlands, and kind of like these places where things are submerged and just under the surface. So I use a lot of ponds, and think about pond life, frogs and um, frogs are indicator species of environmental distress, and I kind of love that idea of these like guys with arms and legs living their lives and being like, oh no, we don't, trouble. So yeah, anywhere that is beautiful but scary enough to make me want to be like this pioneer struggler again.
That's a good kind of, yeah, good combo. We have another nice comment here. Beautiful presentation, Yeon Ji and David. Your installation is gorgeous at BMAC, and happy birthday, Yeon Ji.
Thank
So now that
you.
you outed yourself, it's
I
like birthday upcoming. It's going to be nonstop.
thank you.
I actually have a question for you, and it's something that I think I talked to you a tiny bit about when you were here with your students. But you think of yourself as a sculptor, is that right? Like that's
Yeah, I think mostly.
right.
I'm definitely more of like a spatial thinker.
Right. And because you're shifting a lot between 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. And I wonder if maybe does it make it easier for you to like let yourself go when you're working in 2 dimensions as someone who kind of thinks of themselves as a sculptor? Like, are you as precious about painting or are you less precious about painting because you're not seeing it as kind of like the main focus of your practice?
Wow, that is a great question. Okay. So I think in my paintings, um, yeah, definitely. It's like for me in my mind, I'm like, oh, I want to create this like landscape or this installation. I want to be there, but I
Mm.
don't have the space because I'm in New York and I don't have the time to actually create all these pieces. So I'm gonna just, if you look at every single one of my paintings, they are like
Mm.
perspective stacked on top of perspective because I really want to be in a literal space. And
Mm.
yeah, I guess my paintings do take a long time, but in a way, like I'm creating a whole entire world that would be many, many sculptures like flattened into
Mm.
this one space. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm definitely not like a formally trained painter, like, you know, um, but like I love playing around with colors and even just like these textural materials in my work.
Mm. Well, this is a good segue to this next question, which is a great question. Hi, Yunji and David. I love your exhibit. Congratulations. I'm interested in finding out more about your process. I heard you say that you use a hot glue gun a lot. Are you also using resin to cover objects, or are you casting objects? Is there a connection between resin or glue with the message of your work?
That is a great question. I am mostly using hot glue. Resin for me is more of like a practical use where I really do need to seal. Like if I do a photo transfer on vinyl, that photo transfer is very fragile. So I'll do like a coat of resin. Um, but I'm not using resin to cast any of my forms.
Mm.
I do use hot glue because again, like it's a fast material and it suits my like my patients now, like get immediate, like right, hurry. And also like in terms of like the time that I have, it's a material that I feel comfortable with and it's not expensive. But I am emotionally tied to like hot glue. I am emotionally tied to like Elmer's glue and
Mm.
styrofoam and like fake fur because like they resound for me in the type of materials my parents were like
Mm.
crafting like their little gifts for gift shops. And I grew up like my parents literally like sent me to, college and, raised me on that kind of like quickness.
Mm.
And so it's a material that yeah, I fall back on a lot. And I hope I just, get better and better at it.
Mm.
So, and it's also like a material that if I mess up, it's not like a terrible loss. I just melt it and reuse it again. So super fast. Super.
Nice.
Yunji, I know you said you don't cast, but I wonder if you could talk about there's a telephone in the exhibition. I wonder
Mm.
that is a unique, it's not casting, but I mean maybe you could talk about that process.
Yeah, actually, no. I do use a lot of casting. I use a lot of silicone molds. So I'm just sharing my
Mm.
again
Nice.
with you. Um, but so if you see this, these leaves are cast in a silicone mold. This fig tree was, all of these fig leaves are, so I took my parents the fig tree and the leaves and the fruits and blah blah blah, and I cast a fig a silicone mold around it, and I'm forcing the hot glue into them to take these forms. So I'm
Mm.
definitely using castings and molds to make them.
Oh,
So like these feet on this is like my own feet. I cast them and then I
mm.
made them. I made a mold of them and then I cast them.
We have another question here. Congratulations on your openness and honesty. Your titles personify inanimate objects like houses that remember. You also speak of writers like Steinbeck and haiku. Are there any specific poets or writers that have influenced you?
Um yeah, I'm not like a terribly academic reader, but I do love a Haruki Murakami book.
Mm,
Like his references to like this parallel universe in which like it's like taking apart like the mental state of a person, I think is something that has really influenced me a lot in the way that I'm thinking about this other world of myself.
mm,
I like, the idea of like wrapping yourself in these like stringy things that I use a lot in my sculpture work. It comes from this one imagery where he was describing like an old man trying to remember his past. And he like the line is, I don't remember exactly, but he's like, oh, he tried to like kind of wipe away this like imagined stringy cobweb
mm,
silk almost to try to clear his mind. And like that image really stuck with me in the way that like, you know, um as things age and dust, it just kind of does cocoon you and cover you. And it's protective, but it's also like it's debris. And I kind of really love that imagery. I also read a little bit of Liang Li's
mm,
poems. I think that he talks about one poem, he talks about a room in which everything he loves is in it. And I kind of really love that. Like the state of my parents' home, and I think the state of all of our homes is like a mirror to like what is in our minds and
mm,
what our minds are like. And I think it really helped me to feel okay doing the work that I was doing with these small shrines, because I was like, I'm not the only crazy person making like bird houses and little whatever
mm.
boxes. So yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. I want to make sure that I like urge anyone who has the opportunity to come and see this show. And it is really a kind of incredible experience to be in that space, um, and to get to see inside Yunji's mind a little bit. Before we go, I have a question for you that I feel like I'm always really curious about, especially when I'm talking to an artist who also is an artist with a day job, like a pretty intense day job. And
Mm-hmm.
David, this kind of goes for you too, but like when studio time, when like actual making time is so kind of at a premium, what do you do when you're stuck? Like when you are in a place where you're kind of like either you're not feeling it or you're not in a, you're not in a good frame of mind or something, but you have so little time in which to actually be, in your studio. And I just wonder what you do, Yeon when you get to that point. If
Uh,
you get to that point.
oh, all the time,
Okay.
every single day. Like I long for my summer breaks because I'm like, oh, can
Yeah.
like, I just jot down things down in my sketchbook and I'm like, okay, until then. But like, like I come here after work a few times a week and then like try to have like one full long day at least on the weekend. And like, by the time you come in and you sit down, you're cooked. I'm like, I eat dinner and I'm like, well, I don't know I can't start anything new, but I definitely, if I feel really stuck, I try to just clean a little bit.
Mm,
And if not, it sounds terrible, but it's really not because you're still being creative and it's still this outlet. But like I just continue working mindlessly on what I was working on, in kind of like autopilot, or like I start the next one in that series and the series
Mm,
keeps going.
wow.
But I don't know, David, if you
Yeah. Does
want to
that resonate with you, David?
Well, I was gonna say it's so funny because I was just talking to this other artist, Naomi Reese, about this idea of like
Hmm.
you get in and you're like you and I guess with a date, I guess like the 9 to 5 maybe has shifted our culture and our brains that like
Mm,
I must accomplish something in this time frame. And that's not really what studio work is. It doesn't really a
mm,
lot for that. You're not like they're like clocking in. Um,
yeah.
so I will say like not being stuck, but so much like starting something new. And I think challenge artists that challenge themselves to like try a different direction. It's exciting, but it's also like really scary.
Mm, yeah.
And so you're like, is this gonna work? Am I gonna spend 3 hours on something that I'm gonna have to throw away or reimagine or recycle into something else? Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like Yenji put it beautifully. Like, it's just time is of the essence. Look, I mean, Yenji, you mentioned eating dinner. I don't even eat. Like, I have to like use that time because I'm scared to eat because then I get lethargic and I get relaxed. And um, I was talking to this other artist about like the worst thing you could put. I mean, this is like not a thing, but like the worst thing you could put in your studio is a couch.
Uh,
like
right.
like again everyone's different, but I think the more comfortable you are, I mean, but on the other hand,
Mm,
the more comfortable you are, the more you're likely to kind of relax and
mhm,
like and not get stressed. But I don't know, that's sort of
mm.
this, it's a very triggering question
Sorry, I
to
know
an artist.
what a weird place to end, but it's good
No, it's
because
great.
thank you for spending your very valuable time talking to us. This is really wonderful, and again, the exhibit is absolutely fantastic, and it is up through July 6th. And the museum is open Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 4. Admission is as you wish. You can pay what you wish, and we're happy to have you there. And if you enjoyed tonight's event and would consider making a donation to support this type of free programming, or even want to become a member of the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, you can do that at our website, brattleboromuseum.org, under support. And thank you, Yeon Ji and David, so much for being here. And thank you to Phoebe behind the scenes, who's pulling all the strings. And good night, everybody, and take care.
Thank you.